The Thunder took Game 2 of the finals by 16 points, as they just controlled everything from start to finish. You could point to their suffocating defense as one of the main factors, but what caught my eye was the way that one specific offensive action completely picked apart the Pacers. For the entire playoffs, Indiana's full court ball pressure has been a staple, and in Game 2 we could see it off the jump. Nembhard immediately sprints into the backcourt to follow Shai like a shadow, making somebody else set up the offense. Then after a made basket, not only does Nembhard press up on Shai, Nesmith shadows J-Dub, so it's Chet who ends up running the point. Even when Shai's the guy inbounding, he's still being met with full court pressure as they don't want him getting the ball back, and if he is able to get the ball in the backcourt, whoever's on him is hounding him for all 94 feet in an effort to make him uncomfortable just setting up the offense. The Thunder had such a simple counter though. They're gonna have somebody set a super high ball screen. This not only helps Shai lose his man, it creates an automatic advantage as he attacks downhill, which then compromises the rest of the defense and leads to good shots for everyone. Here's an example from the third. Nembhard pressures the ball full court, Hartenstein sets a ball screen 45 feet away from the basket, and Turner picks up in a high drop. Because he has to play a drive while Nembhard recovers, Ihart's left with an advantage in the short roll, while Caruso cuts baseline. Even if the screen wasn't immediate like on those last plays though, he'd work his way up the court and wait near the logo. One thing I want you to notice is how they space the floor. They've stacked the baseline with a big in the dunker and 2 corner shooters, and there's nobody on the wings. That means when a screen comes, Shai's left with the entire middle of the floor to work with. Here's another example. Because there's no help at the nail, when he turns the corner on a drive, help has to come from the baseline, which he easily beats with some crafty footwork and soft touch. So this is how they started most of their possessions. This time it's Dort who sets a screen to force Halliburton up to the ball, and Shai splits a hedge on his way to the middle of the paint. Again, help comes from the dunker, but now a fourth defender is going to drop from the corner, leaving Chet open for a 3 that he leaves a bit short. Here's another one where Halliburton's man is the one screening. You've got the hedge, you've got Shai splitting it on a drive, but this time there's help from the dunker and the opposite corner, which means that Wiggins is wide open above the break, and he's able to capitalize. You'll notice that a bunch of these screens are angled towards the other side of the court. This is what's called a flat ball screen, and I almost like to think of it as an offensive lineman for Shai, the running back, to build up a head of steam. And even on the misses, the process remained great. They wanted to attack Halliburton, so in early offense, Wallace sets one of those flat ball screens near half court, and Shai beautifully navigates space through multiple help defenders before getting to a great shot that just rims out. The thing about Indiana's point of attack defenders is that they're wanting to fight over the top of every screen. So by turning the corner and going fast, he was able to get 2 feet in the paint at will. Remember, because both wings are empty, he's a threat to attack left or right. So if his defender overplays the side of the screen, he can reject it to get that paint touch. On this one, Chet definitely should have taken the corner 3, only to pass it up and try his hand at a 1 dribble pull-up midi. The point stands though that even if it wasn't in early offense or even a flat ball screen, most of OKC's plays started with Shai coming off a ball screen, turning the corner, and leaving the Pacers completely helpless. They really mixed it up in terms of who they were looking to attack. This time it's Siakam, and he's gonna switch onto Shai, but can't keep him from getting to the paint for a layup. Between Siakam and Toppin, it was a mix of hedging and switching. This time Chet sets a screen, Siakam hedges, then Ihart sets a second screen which forces Bryant to switch. Now Shai has a big time mismatch with Bryant on an island, and all it takes is a blow-by to collapse the entire defense, leaving Chet with a wide open 3. Real quick, I want to go back to the beginning of the play though, because one thing I really liked from the Thunder was that they sprinkled in some double big minutes whenever Thomas Bryant was on the court. With both bigs in the game, they can be utilized in so many ways. More times than not, they went with Ihart as that high ball screener while Chet played from the dunker. Bryant jumps out in a high drop, leaving the short roll advantage and lob up top. Speaking of Bryant, that's another guy who the Thunder attacked. He opened the game in deep drop coverage, but Shai just used that space to turn the corner and get downhill, which then drew extra help and resulted in quality shots. As the game progressed, they started bringing Bryant closer to the level of screens in a high drop, and that not only makes it easier to find the short roll with a downhill advantage, it puts the big in a more vulnerable position to get beat if Shai turns the corner on a drive. Occasionally, they even had Bryant try out a hedge, only for Shea to continuously split the gap and get to the paint, draw help, then find the open man for a high quality shot. It was the exact same thing with Miles Turner. He was either hedging or getting up in a high drop, and they just couldn't keep Shea from creating an advantage every single time down the floor. Haliburton was also hedging whenever he was put in the action. Just like with the bigs, he was splitting the gap, getting downhill, and making all the right reads to get his teammates good shots. Then in the second half, the Pacers shifted to more of an early hedge, sending Haliburton above the level of the screen to take away the space to drive, but all that did was leave Wallace with a 4-on-3 advantage, resulting in an easy floater. All that's to say, it didn't matter who OKC went at, they were getting an advantage. The worst case scenario for the Thunder in these spots is that the screen doesn't create any separation, and they don't have to bring extra help. Only now it's just a cleared out middle of the floor isolation, which is still incredibly good offense. When rewatching the game, I actually hand-tracked every possession that the Thunder set a ball screen for Shea. By my count, there were 34 such instances, and on those plays, the Thunder generated 1.21 points per possession. For reference, their average half-court offense in the regular season scored 1.05 points, and in the playoffs, just 0.99. I didn't only track the total possessions, I tracked all of the different nuances. If we look at this data by the location of the screen, half of them were set at or near the three-point line for 1.18 points per possession, while the other half were set at or near the half-court line for 1.25. If we look at this data by who was defending the screener, 14 of them were defended by a big for 1.43 points per possession, 9 of them were defended by either Siakam or Toppin for 1.75 points, and another 9 were defended by Haliburton for just 0.78 points. Those Haliburton possessions aren't what you'd typically expect from that low of a number though. He had one really good hedge in the second quarter that led to a Shea turnover, but outside of that, these are some of the scoreless possessions. You had that corner 3 opportunity from Chet, which he passed up for a 1-dribble pull-up. Then you had that corner 3 from Chet that he actually took and missed. You had the high hedge, which Shea navigated to get to the mid-range where he missed a wide open jumper, and you had this play from the fourth where Shea got into the paint, kicked it out to J-Dub, and he missed a warm-up jumper. So going back to the graphic, just because the numbers look great with Haliburton in the action doesn't necessarily mean they were stopping OKC from doing what they wanted to do. This also shows up if we break the numbers down by coverage. A hedge was their most used coverage at 14, but most of them were Haliburton, and they gave up 1.14 points per possession. On the 9 possessions they switched, they gave up 1.25 points, and on the 10 possessions they dropped, they gave up 1.4 points. Basically, every defender got torched, every coverage got torched, so what can Indiana do to adjust moving forward? Remember, OKC's looking to empty the wings. In this setup, the Pacers could try to lift these 2 defenders up to the elbows, essentially zoning up the ball. That risks the corners, but it at least doesn't let Shea control the middle of the floor. In a similar vein, they actually went to a 2-3 zone in the third. That way the ball screen immediately gets handed off to the next wing, and there's nowhere to attack in the middle. Another potential tweak could be Indiana maybe getting a little bit aggressive with the pressure. Because of Shea's ability to get downhill, this really compromises help and unlocks the supporting guys, which led to 5 different players scoring at least 15 points in game 2. In the same line of thinking, I'd like to see the Pacers try ducking under some of these screens. I mentioned they want to fight over. By my count, there were only 2 instances where they went under. On the first, Shea created a ton of separation but ended up with an off-the-dribble 3, which you'll live with, and on the second, he didn't really have a free lane into the paint, tried to force contact and draw a foul only to throw up an awkward shot. So I'd say there are a few different things they can try. The only problem is that even if they figure out how to cover the ball screens, that isn't the only thing they had trouble dealing with. In the second half, OKC started clearing a side of the floor for Shea to post up the smaller Nembhard, and he really made the defense pick their poison. If he turned his back to the basket and help came from the top of the key, he'd find the open man, which then put the defense in rotation and led to great shots. Then of course, as soon as he was left in single coverage, he'd fall back on that all-time great scoring of his to get a bucket. The only thing they really didn't try was loading up early or sending a double from the weak side, so maybe that's the adjustment, because bringing help from the perimeter just didn't work at all, and once they got the ball moving, once again, everybody was getting involved and hitting shots. I counted 6 post-ups in the second half. On those plays, they scored 1.67 points per possession, and one of those empty trips was an open 3 from J-Dub. Basically, what I'm trying to get at is the fact that it didn't matter if it was a high ball screen or in isolation, Shea completely picked apart the Pacers in Game 2. That led to the Thunder producing a 127 offensive rating, their third highest mark of the entire playoffs. Because of the floor their defense gives them, anytime you're giving up 120 points, you're not winning that game. It's imperative for any opponent that either Shea plays great or the supporting cast does, never both. Because when that happens, they basically become unbeatable. In addition to 5 players scoring 15, Shea finished with an efficient 34. That's how OKC ends up winning this game by 16, and we'll have to see if Indiana has any defensive fixes heading into Game 3. If you enjoyed this breakdown, make sure to drop a like, subscribe, and turn my post notifications on to be first on more content. If you're interested in my more in-depth research, make sure to check out the Hoop Venue podcast and my social media profiles. You can find those links in the description. Feel free to let me know down in the comments what you thought of this game. As always, I hope you all have a great day, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.